I am a poor wayfaring stranger, while traveling through this world of woe. Yet there's no sickness, toil, or danger in that bright world to which I go. I know dark clouds will gather round me. I know my way is rough and steep, but golden fields lie out before me, where God's redeemed shall ever sleep.
Hello and welcome to Tea Time Theology, Season 7. I'm one of your hosts, Taylor Wilkie. I am also joined by Ivy Swinsky.
Hello.
And the Reverend Drake Douglas.
Hello there.
This season, we are taking a look at the television show Star Trek Strange New Worlds, specifically through a Christian lens. This is something that I've been really excited about talking about, and I think that, with the popularity of season, was it 5? That we did the popularity of season? We think this would be a good spot because the number 3, the third most popular episode of Tea Time Theology is a Star Trek episode.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. We actually had Reverend Tim Watt, who used to be down in Newport. He actually did Ben Sisko as a Christ figure. That was big fun.
All right.
That was a big fun episode. So this is the first episode of the season, so we're doing the first episode of Strange New Worlds, called, oddly enough, Strange New Worlds. In this episode, Pike is called back from shore leave to go rescue number 1 because she got caught up in a first contact situation that went south, apparently.
It
did. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. So when we meet Pike on the when he's in his cabin in Bear Creek, Montana, which
looks quite nice.
I would also go to Montana.
I would also like to stay there.
I watched that episode. I was so let's check out Airbnbs in Bear Creek, Montana.
I had a similar thought. Yes.
We kind of get Pike in a state of depression or self-discovery. For those who don't know, Pike earlier in another show got a glimpse of his future. He gets a glimpse of what's going to happen to him and how essentially he's going to die.
Correct.
And like anybody, I think that would shake anybody.
I think there's a reason why we often don't know that information.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's I like to call it his beep box dilemma.
I would say also, while we're still in Montana, I think it's interesting that usually when people run, they go to the mountains. I think that's something that happens a lot in Jesus' own journey, is there's the sermon on the top of the mountain. And then even during Holy Week, he leaves and goes to a mountain. The devil meets him at the top of a mountain and is like, this is your world. So I think it's also interesting if we're looking at this from a Christian lens that we're starting hiding in a mountain, which is something that Jesus did a lot. If we're going to look at Pike as this Christ figure throughout.
He definitely needed time away, that's for sure. He clearly gets a little, I don't know if I would say annoyed, but maybe annoyed with his posse, and enough to need to say, okay, I need a minute, or maybe, how about 2 of you come with me?
Yeah.
The rest of you, I really need some space. And so, yes, I think that's a perfectly valid point to make. What's, I think, really interesting, even in the interaction in the morning with the friend of his who is over, she senses that he's hiding, very, very, very clearly. There's a sense there that he's hiding, and that whatever he's hiding from isn't going to just go away by him hiding in the mountain. So I think there's an interesting play here too about there are seasons in which we need to retreat, right? but retreating and hiding is not the same thing. And so I think we see Pike sort of maybe doing this a little bit heavy-handedly, understandably, because the you'd have to watch, like you were talking about, Taylor, the previous show, to see that it is very troubling, and it's worth paying attention to. But then, I love the scene where the admiral, they're trying to track him down on his communicator. He won't answer, and it's just sort of this sort of relentless. And finally, the admiral, right? Who would be like the God figure, right?
The angel comes down from heaven.
Literally, tracks him down while he's on his horse in the middle of nowhere, and is like, okay, enough. Like, you've got to stop. And you have to re-engage. And I saw that and felt it very acutely. Being like, man, God has had to do that to me more than once, just to say, enough. Like, okay, I get it, but like, no, like that this is a call, and I will not be ignored any longer. And so I think that was a really striking analogy, just literally, like you said, out of the sky, in front of his path on his horse, just trying to be this Lone Ranger, and yet God says, no. We won't be doing that any longer. Yeah.
You have to come back.
You said that God has done that to you more than once. Do you have an example that you might want to share?
You also don't have to share.
I'm happy to. The priesthood.
Don't say he doesn't have to, Ivy. It's like we're trying to fill time here.
Yes, we need content.
We need content. It's just like, Star Trek's nice. End of episode.
Yeah, I mean, the priesthood is probably not an unsurprising one. I came into it while not old at all. I'm still considered quite a young priest, but I had a career for about 10 years before I kind of pulled that lever officially, and it was a really slow burn. I sensed a kind of call as early as maybe middle school. I was in a different tradition at the time, a tradition that until quite recently I wouldn't have been allowed to sort of be fully who I am and also be a faith leader. And so there was a kind of hiding in that even for a lot of my life, and saying, oh, well, that's not an option, so I don't need to think about it. And looking back on that now, I see that as maybe a bit of a lazy approach to that process and that kind of discernment. And when I discovered the Episcopal Church, or more accurately, it kind of discovered me in the middle of a graduate program, going into a totally different field, just prepping, and even that there was a sense of excitement around a kind of reanimated call that I felt that I now needed to sort of learn what that would look like in this context, what this context is, learn a lot about it. And I took my sweet time, almost 10 years from the point of, sensing and reanimated call, through a process, which itself can take some time, but not 10 years. And it's funny to me, I think God often sort of, comes down in the shuttle in different ways. I think sometimes it's in your own kind of personal prayer life, or there are circumstances that sort of just make a clear statement that, enough is enough. It's time to do whatever it is I'm calling you to do. For me, it was actually my husband. I'd gone through the discernment process officially through the diocese. I'd sort of gotten the okay to move forward and go to school and sort of kind of get on with this thing. And I kept sort of year after year say, okay, but I want to work for one more year. We should save up a little bit more money. We should. And there was always sort of this very reasonable, logistical reason to keep sort of waiting, to sort of not want to do that real big leap, because, I knew that for me, once that step was taken, there's no going back. And I quite liked my life before, and I still do, by the way, just to be clear. But I was not running from anything into the priesthood, and finally my husband was just like, okay, it's either do this or don't do it. We cannot stay in this suspended state, which is called to maybe another theme later in the show, but we either got to do it or don't do it. and that I was kind of like, okay, received. You know, sort of. I think God definitely worked through him in that way. And so I just sort of had to go out on a limb and say, okay, I don't know, I don't feel like I have enough of this or enough of that, or, you know, how are we going to pay this bill, or how are we going to make this work? And just sort of had to say, okay, enough. Like I will go. And per usual, God helped us figure it out.
So just kind of like stepping through the episode, so the animal comes down. Pike gets told, you know, you gotta go, and something weird happens. It's not really weird. When he gets on the Enterprise, they do like the mission briefing, where we get like, you know, we see the ship that Una was captaining at the time. It's a single nacelle ship. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know you don't care.
Do you want to translate that for the rest of us?
It's weird.
Okay.
It's a weird looking ship. How do you feel about single nacelle ships?
I don't know if I thought about it enough to have an opinion. To be fair.
Do you have an opinion, Taylor?
I feel like we need yours. This is clearly a.
Well, I always thought it was it was a symmetrical thing. You know, like you need to keep the ship balanced, and like you're really going to center that nacelle in the middle, like dead center middle of the ship. I don't know. I really didn't like it.
Maybe that's
it was off-putting.
Maybe that's how space works. I don't know.
Maybe that's like a thing though, because you needed Pike and number one. You can't just have one. See,
it's an outsider. It's the outsider perspective that often shows us. You know,
Yeah.
Guys, this is Ivy's first Trek.
Yes.
This is that's good. That's good stuff right there.
So she's gonna have hot takes, I hope.
I hope. I had to ask Taylor. I was like, so is this like Marvel multiverse? Are we all in the same timeline? What's happening? But we figured it out.
Mm-hmm. We did. And for anybody who doesn't know, this show does take place between the events of The Cage and the original series. That's generally where we are. I'm not sure how far before the beginning of Strange New Worlds The Cage was. I feel like the uniforms are drastically different. So, but of course, you know, Starfleet changes uniforms every 3 days.
You got to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
You know, it's a pretty repetitive job. So.
It is.
You gotta really get comfy in those space pajamas.
That's right. I mean, this is why we change up our vestments seasonally too. You gotta keep things fresh.
I'd say.
So one of the things I noticed in this rewatch of the season, especially looking at it through a Christian lens as we are, I kind of noticed that, like, you know, Pike has pillars in his life. These people are pillars. Una is a pillar in his life. Spock is a pillar in his life. So much to the point where Pike gets on the Enterprise and he's on his way. He steps off the shuttle, and his new security chief is there. Leon Noonien Sung, which was refreshing to see Sung not played by Brent Spiner, or that's some really good makeup. You know? And she said, "I'm your acting number one," and he kind of like he doesn't push back, but you get and this is just a acting choice, I think, by Anson Mount, who is quickly becoming my favorite captain. He is pushed off center by that. He was expecting Spock to be his number one, someone he trusts, someone he can confide in, and all of a sudden there's this new person who he doesn't know that he just has to start working with, which on a regular day in Starfleet probably wouldn't be a big deal, but because Pike is going through the trauma of knowing when and how he's going to die, is.
Yes.
So with that being said, later in the episode we have like a nice Spock Freudian slip. We have a nice Spock Pike interaction where Pike is kind of confiding in Spock, and I noticed that these people are kind of like disciple figures in Pike's life. I guess my question to the group is, who do you think, which disciple do you think Spock is playing in this scene? And, you know, how do you think that these people are, like, you know, the disciples of Captain Pike.
I really like a reading of the Bible that looks at the disciples through a found family lens. It's like, if anyone wants to write that master thesis, I would read it. But I think that is sort of the way that I really like looking at those stories, is that this is like a friend group that is trying to change the world, or at least make it a better place. And I do think that that is a story, at least in recent times, that has become very used a lot, is this sort of like found family, building trust with each other, that kind of stuff. I don't know if there's like Spock is being Peter in this episode, that I would really think through. But what I think is interesting in how Pike, if we're looking at Pike as our like Jesus figure, is that in the Bible, Jesus is very much like, this is what's going to happen, this is what we have to do. These are his friends, but they are not his contemporaries. And what I mean by that is, like, he is very much a teacher to them. There's not, like, this collaborative sharing of knowledge between the two of them. This isn't like a team project. Like, Jesus is here, this is what we're doing. You can either help or you can, like, go home. And I don't think that's what Pike's doing here. I think that he genuinely wants Spock to sort of help him through this, even later in the episode, not to jump the shark, but like once Una comes back and number one comes back, like he tells her pretty quickly about what's going on. And even in some of the other episodes, from what I've seen of him, he seems to really care what everyone on the ship is doing and thinking and feeling. And I think that's a different dynamic. So I don't know if like they're his disciples, because I think that is a certain power structure that he inherently walks away from. He doesn't want that power structure. He's like, yes, I'm the captain, but like every single person on that ship is bringing something to it.
I agree. And I think what is even, there's even questions like this, I think, are really important to sort of zoom back and look at what the question's really asking, and then also what it assumes. They're great questions to ask, and I have a lot of fun asking them. But when we do this sort of translation from Bible to real life, or or even to make believe life, that I think a lot of us wish were real life, then these analogies and these comparisons and things can be instructive. And I think for the Christian, it is also critical to remember that there's a profound truth and necessary truth in remembering that only Jesus can be Jesus, right? And so, yes, we can do all these imperfect comparisons, and we can say, oh, being Jesus must have been like this, or, this interaction would have been similar. And I very much see Spock as like either kind of a Peter or maybe a John, right? This person, maybe even more so John, the beloved, who if anyone, I like to think would have gotten sort of like behind the curtain look at sort of how Jesus was, right, doing, right? It probably would have been John. But again, I don't think that's even really the point. And in a way, the necessary sort of deference, the chain of command, the sort of even the institutional structure and culture of Starfleet, is, I think, itself a really great analogy to exactly this like power thing you're talking about, Ivy, where it's, yes, Jesus is profoundly patient, kind of, with all of these people, right? Who are, I love your words, just being a group trying to, either save the world or make the world a better place. And so often we are seeing him toggle this human divine thing, because at the end of the day, we have to remember that like Jesus is God, and therefore, yes, there is knowledge, right? And there is, ability, and there is vision, and there is all of this stuff that only Jesus can have and do and know, because Jesus is Jesus. So I actually like this question as an example of kind of a meta question that's worth asking. What do we do when we ask these questions? Like, what does that do to our theology, or how does that inform? Are we being really careful about the kind of lines we draw? Because I think it is easy to sort of transform Jesus into somebody else if we're not careful, with sort of like, oh, like Pike is this, and like, yes, clearly Pike is a Christ figure, but necessarily limited as not God.
Very cool.
And I also think what's interesting, I'm looking at my like very sparse notes compared to Taylor's like 2-page typed
Very
thing.
helpful.
It's one, and it's only typed because I watched it on my computer, and I had a keyboard, and I just opened up a Google Doc.
But one thing that I had written down as sort of like a theme of the episode is sort of like this knowledge versus experience. And I think that sort of brings up what you said, that like Jesus does know how it's going to end, but he knows how it's going to end in a different way, because Pike is limited. He just knows his death. He doesn't know how it's going to affect everybody else. Mm-hmm. And that's different from Jesus knowing his death, because he knows his death is then going to save everybody. Okay. And it's not just these like 4 names that he can search. It's like, this is everyone. I can then see past that. Mm-hmm. And I think that is an interesting difference if we're going to try and like make this parallel, but also like knowledge versus experience. He has this knowledge and the people around him have knowledge, but then also you have to sort of like live on experience as well. Mm-hmm. And like sort of like that muscle memory between the two of them.
And I think we see him throughout these first few episodes actually kind of growing that that sort of muscle in him, because the more, and I think, I can't remember exactly what episode it's in, Una will sort of be like, well, are you sure this is the way this has to be, right? Mm-hmm. Are you sure this is your fate? Are you sure there's not a way? And once he starts to sort of think about this, it does seem that his sort of obsession or fixation on the event that he sees, even he starts to accept it, and then all of a sudden it does not dictate everything that he does or all the decisions that he makes, and I think that's exactly kind of what you're saying is, and like that's probably a pre-baked, that's a skill and ability Jesus had pre-baked, but for the rest of us, I think, and including Pike, right, you have to sort of watch how that changes things, right? And I think that's exactly right. Yep.
I mean, he even says it in the when they're on their way out to insert name of planet here. He says, like, we're going to do this. He briefs the crew, and he even says at the end, like, nobody dies. Mm-hmm. He is going to make sure nobody dies, because he knows that he's not going to die, but it's up to him to. Now right now he feels the weight of his shoulders that wherever he goes, he's going to be fine no matter how bad the danger is, until for the next 10 years. But others will die around him, and he feels a responsibility to save not just the 4 kids in the engineering section. But he feels a responsibility to save everybody that's in his orbit.
I don't know if we fully explained that, but like the vision of him dying is that he like dies to save other people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and that's another interesting, because we get a lot of flashbacks. I really watched the flashback of the flashback, which is, but he likes to say he doesn't actually think he knows he's not actually gonna die. He keeps saying, the version of me that I am right now will die, because in a flashback we see him in the box, in the beat box,
right,
with the the one beep for yes, 2 beeps for no system.
Barely alive.
He's barely alive. It's like a whole thing. It ends up really great for him though. Like,
okay, I'll watch it.
I'll throw it in.
Spoiler alert.
The spoilers. The cage comes back in a big way. But yeah, it's just there's a lot of responsibility on him. I think he feels, especially in this episode, to make sure everything goes well for everybody. And that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
And we get to see, too, the consequences of living in that mindset as well, because it's not possible.
Right.
and it's inevitable that things will go wrong and that he cannot save everyone. And so even like all of this is very instructive. And I agree, I agree with both of you. He is just the character that's being portrayed here as Pike is probably like the most human captain we've probably seen in really, I think, the whole Star Trek universe.
Oh, yeah.
And we're just seeing so much. I also have a really vested interest, both inside and outside the church, on leadership, kind of what that looks like, what is good leadership, what is helpful, what's timely, what is, all these things. And leadership as sort of like a way of being more than just a bullet point on a job description, right? And so he, I think, is showing us a lot that to take on the mantle of leadership, or at least a kind of leadership that speaks not only to like getting a job done, but also leading people's way of being, the way of looking at the world. Starfleet is a very moral sort of organization, and that's awesome. And it's kind of like, yeah, that would be great if the church were sort of like that, and so that's what I love about the series in general, is that as far as the science has taken us, and I remember in The Next Generation, Picard, has this great interaction. I can't remember where they are, what they're doing, but he's on this planet and kind of explaining to this other alien race sort of like what humans have accomplished in he said, we've alleviated poverty, we've cured all disease, we've blah blah, done all these things that basically our life is completely inundated with, and through technology they've done that. There's been one cohesive kind of human race. And then they say, so then what do you do? Then what's the point of being? And he said, well, we explore and we learn and we love and we do all the, and I'm just thinking, yeah, like that's it, right? Like that's the point. And so anyway, the circular point here, but I think Pike is really showing us that no matter how much we can problem solve, that we can sort of approach problems, or we can have a clear mindset about what should be or what can be, there will always remain like the human question, right? About, even in the far-flung corners of the galaxy, there will be an ethical dilemma on that starship, no matter how advanced it is. And we see this over and over and over again, especially with Pike, but pretty much in any Star Trek episode.
I think that scene you're talking about was in First Contact with Lily, in the when she kind of like, when he says, like, when she's like, how much did the ship cost, and he's like, we don't have any money, and she was like, what do you mean, you guys don't get paid? It's like, no, we just do it. We're just out here doing what we want. You do what you want to do, and I don't know. It's just very aspirational.
Yes.
In this episode, we really do get one of the general complaints that the internet seems to have with New Trek, which I completely disagree with. They say why is New Trek so woke? And my answer is, always has been. Oh my gosh, I don't know what you've been watching. But like, it's always been this way.
Yes.
And in this episode, we get browbeat over the head with like where we're going.
Yes.
This is where we're going. We're going. The society that they first contacted was given a warp drive too early. They were given access to that technology too early. Spock even said it. We could have invented an atom bomb before we split the atom, but why would we? Mm-hmm. And that's essentially what happened. That society was given warp technology, and instead of using it to travel to the stars, they're going to use it to kill each other.
Right.
And I think that's just a great allegory for where we are in our society today.
Absolutely. So when Pike comes back to, address these warring factions, and he
and it transports into the middle of the room.
The whole montage, right, and sets up this. He said, let me tell you a story about this planet called Earth, right?
Yeah.
And then this happens and then the before it became, and eventually all these strife-laden problems erupt into what is then World War III, and he gets very specific. He said, and then nuclear war broke out, and a third of all of the planet died, and out of that, luckily, we were able to sort of come together and just mapping everything out. And I was very appreciative that a show that actually I think is a very positivist sort of outlook. I mean, it is moral, good generally always wins, all of these things. And we have plenty of shows and movies and things that are willing to stick our face into the scary reality of what might very well come, but they don't go any further than that, right? They just say, well, here's what's going to happen.
We're on our way to destruction.
But this, I really appreciate that, in the sort of sober way, they say, yeah, this happened because we similarly went down this path and we didn't stop. And yet they still see, right, what then comes. And so I think that's actually an easier way to hear and see that truth than for someone to just push your head into a toilet, right? Here we are, So I appreciate that as a meta, and I agree with you. I 100% disagree with the internet on that. You watch TNG and it's every episode is some thinly veiled
it's not
allegory
even close.
About gay marriage, right? It's in 1994, right?
I mean, you watch. There's the episode. There's the episode of Deep Space Nine about the Bell riots. The food is scarce, and I don't know. Everyone, listen. This is something that might be crazy, but they're taking people without jobs and homelessness and people who are undesirables, and they're not helping them. They're just gathering them all and moving them to one specific area of a city.
Whoa.
I mean, that doesn't sound familiar.
Okay, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, I mean, that was a commentary on something that was going on in the 90s.
Right.
But then you watch those episodes today, and you're like, holy shit, it's happening again. And you even watch episodes of the original series, and these were thinly veiled references to what's going on then, but it's happening now. And I think that what happens to Star Trek is it's written to show us what's going on in that moment.
Right.
And it's very apparent to us who are watching it live in that moment what they're talking about. But then through just distance and time, we start to forget. We don't remember what it was like to be living in our society when that episode was, and then for a while it's just fun and ooh, what a crazy idea that would be. But all of a sudden it just rolls right on back, and all of a sudden you rewatch Star Trek. You're just doing a random Star Trek rewatch, and they're talking about something from that they talked about in the 80s that is happening right now in this moment.
Right. Which makes it a good show.
Makes it a great show. What do you think, Ivy?
No, I agree. I had watched, so my interaction with this show was that they do a musical episode in season 2, and my mom and I thought it would be fun to just watch the musical episode, so we just watched that. No context of anything else, had not watched anything else, Star Trek. And then we're like, oh, this is kind of fun characters, let's do it. And I had watched the pilot episode, and I didn't remember why I didn't watch the rest of the show, because I watched it and I really liked it. And then in this rewatch, I was like, that's why I didn't rewatch it, because that ending sequence, and for me, between my job and the rest of the work that I do, I'm I am living this already. I don't need this to be in sort of the TV show and media that I consume in that way. But I'm glad now that I've watched the rest of them, because I'm oh, that's just this one moment. It's the pilot episode. You have to make your thesis statement in a pilot episode of why they should fund the rest of your season. And I think what's interesting, I think we get to see two moments in the same sort of vein. We see that moment with Pike trying to sort of talk to these people and that, but you also get to see it with Uhura, is that how you say your name?
Uhura.
Uhura in the elevator scene, which
That
is
scene.
like the best part of the whole show. I was like, this is it. This is
That's
why
the
I'm watching
moment.
this show.
This is Star Trek. That is Star Trek.
Yep.
Because what happens is they beam someone up from this world. They wake up by accident. They're running around the starship.
Happens
They're
more often than you
terrified.
think.
All the time, actually.
We're just gonna knock him out. No one ever stays knocked out.
No one ever does. But then he meets this character in the elevator, and she starts talking to him. She's like, "Oh, I've read that like this is a game that you play in this," and it's such like a great human moment of like this is how you sort of start to build those bridges is like seeing people as people. And I think that is sort of what's really great about this show is it shows sort of like the same type of interaction two different ways, one on like this large sort of like political scale and one in that like person to person. And I think that's sort of like what ends up happening from my very deep knowledge of 4 episodes of Star Trek, that like it sort of is that dichotomy of like we're meeting these large worlds, but then it's also like what's the human aspect of it.
Absolutely.
I mean, this show was a breath of fresh air, I think, when it came out. When the pilot episode of Strange New Worlds dropped, I watched it and I was like, thank God they're just doing Star Trek again. It's not trying to be anything else. We're not trying to reinvent it. We're not trying to do anything different. It's just Star Trek.
It's the mission.
It's where
Yep.
Strange New Worlds. What do we do? We explore. That's the mission, and it's great.
It is. And one other thing that's said that I think is interesting as well is that you don't believe you're going to die until you're like actually about to die.
Great point. Yes.
Which is just like such an interesting concept to think about. And I think it's so true. I mean, like, I don't think anyone wakes up any morning being like, today's the day I'm going to die. So, like, let's see how that works.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think...
Unless you're Worf.
Yeah, that's true. He's very ready all the time. Well, and so here's a great... I mean, that's a really great example, actually. You know, I this is a bit of a hard-ass take, but I do think that we are called as Christians to have more of that than not, right? There is a kind of honesty about our bodily or sort of earthly life that I think in ways like in the wake of Jesus and how he led his ministry, accepted his death, you know, and then of course also returns to us, is that there is some benefit, as difficult as it is, you know, very, very difficult to live every day. And it's very, you know, it's the cliche, right? Live every day as though it's your last. You know, I think that does squarely fit with our call as Christians, you know, the self-emptying, you know, we would call that, the theological terms like kenosis, right? That we would kind of continually empty ourselves for the sake of the world and the sake of the gospel, and we see that, you know, like profoundly in Jesus. And there is I don't know, I don't have a whole point other than just to say that he makes a good point, but I think it's a positive point, right? That it's an invitational one, right? Is to say, don't wait until then to think about it, right? Don't wait until then to think about the reality that unless some really crazy things happen, we will all get to that point. And what does it mean to die well? What does it mean to live as in a way as though your death is not a huge upending of your life? It is just a part of your life. And I think we're also... I love that Pike points that out. Or no, it's not Pike who points it out. It's
Lan.
It's Lan, as she points it out.
La'an Noonien. So
In her, you know, I've been playing around with this idea for years now, and if a listener knows the word for this, then please someone what do you say, comment or whatever.
We're desperate to hear from you.
Yeah,
Please.
yeah.
Right.
Like, subscribe, and smash that like button, whatever. And, I do wonder if at an extreme, there is a kind of sin in insisting to survive, right? And doing anything and everything to ensure your own group's survival. And I think we see this play out in the factions, right? They will blow up their planet in order to beat the other person or to survive, quote unquote. And we see what this does contemporarily, right? We see what happens when, hypothetically speaking, you are a world superpower that is going to do whatever it takes to maintain that status. If it's going to be to say silly things like conquer nearby countries for your own benefit, or or do terrible things in the shadows to maintain some sort of economic or military upper hand. And then I keep thinking, for what though? But why really? Like why is it so important to be on top? Why is it so important to be the biggest or the meanest or the best? And so this idea about survival for the sake of doing it, I think, is an open invitation for all Christians to say, is that actually the call though? Is the call simply to survive, or is the call to sort of live in a way that is maybe bigger than that?
Like, do we all just need to take a breath and go to Bear Creek, Montana?
I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think we should.
As we're sitting in a room as it's snowing outside.
Oh my
It's
God,
quite
the snow
nice.
is beautiful.
It's so cozy in here.
Yes. Wait, can I say one thing off of what Jake just said?
Yeah.
I think what's also coming to my mind when you're talking about this is sort of like Judas's part in sort of like the play of Jesus's life. And I think he's a very interesting character anyways. Kind of gets a bad rap.
I wonder why.
I don't know why. But I do think there's something interesting in sort of this idea of not knowing, because sort of what we get from him is that after he betrays Jesus and all of this kind of stuff, he immediately regrets it once he sees what that actually means. And I do think there is sort of a part of this is you can think hypothetically if this happens, this is what will occur, or this is what this will be, and I was stopping this, but until you actually see what occurs, you can't know what those decisions were and if they were the correct ones either. So kind of buyer's remorse as well.
And we see Pike do a lot of this in his decision. I love all of the decision making scenes, especially the imperfect ones. You have the whole Kobayashi Maru problem, right?
Yeah,
and so for the lay people, the Kobayashi Maru is a excuse me, is a test in Starfleet Academy that's unwinnable, right? So you pretend that you're a captain, and there is no way. The test is built so there is really no way to get out, right? That you have to either sacrifice yourself or sacrifice your crew, and that's the point, right? That's the instructive point. And Pike has many of these. We'll see them. I think in episode 4, it's very acute, right?
Oh,
Where
episode 4.
he has to make an impossible decision, and that's kind of, I think, what I hear you saying, Ivy, is that that's we don't know, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to do it.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah. So, Drake, what would you say your take is on this episode? Your takeaway?
The big one, we've kind of meandered from it, but I saw a lot about vocation in this episode. I think it's very clear with Pike at the beginning and sort of this, unresponsiveness to call. And so kind of with my story, you get beat over the head and you're like, okay, knock it off. Come on. And I think that, is it this episode where... No, it's the next one. We'll see Uhura sort of wrestling kind of with her call. So maybe we'll edit that part out because
No,
that's
we'll
not
just
gonna, that's
preview
not gonna work.
It's okay.
next
Listen
episode.
next week, and Drake will talk
Yeah,
about
we'll do
the
that.
hearse.
But-
Same Trek time, same Trek channel.
Right. But I think generally, what we get a glimpse of, especially in episode 1, which is very fitting for the first episode of anything, is sort of like the vocational call of Starfleet. We get to see a lot of people, even La'an, right? We hear about, to some degree, like her past and her trauma and how that led her to Starfleet, and sort of how everyone kind of got there. And it's a really interesting idea to think of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an institution, but to have a place where everyone sort of ends up together, because there's sort of that line about vocation. Vocation is where your greatest skill or talent meets the world's greatest need, right? And Starfleet is such a great example of that, and there's a clear analogy here to the church, and so there's so many opportunities in this I think episode to think about how any of us who do see ourselves inside of the church, or maybe wanting to sort of engage or attach ourselves to it in some new way, is to think about the fact that we all get here in different ways, right? We all, our paths, our vocational calls to be who God made us to be are different. And some of those are riddled with all kinds of terrible things. And yet there is something that the church and that the vocational sort of home of people can do to make all of those things count for something. And so I just see that over and over again in this episode. And I think it's an invitation to think and pray about that. I mean, at any point in our walk of faith is how did I get here? And where am I going? And why am I here? And it's an important thing to do from time to time.
All right. Well, Drake, thank you so much for being here with us. For those who don't know, Drake is essentially our featured guest for this season. We're going to be hearing his voice for the next 3 episodes, plus the season finale.
Ooh.
Next 4 episodes.
4 episodes. Well, no, we just did 1.
And he's doing through 5.
Is he doing through 5?
I am.
Yeah. You demanded that he do the Spock episode.
Well, that's big fun, guys. Spock Amok. Anytime I see Amok in a Star Trek title, I'm all like, this is going to be a big fun episode.
Spock is the best.
Ivy, fun fact, Ivy doesn't know what's coming in
I
Spock
don't.
Amok.
I have only watched through episode 4.
No spoilers.
Spock is my God, how infuriating of a character, but how lovable at the same time. Like all of us.
Yeah, he has a great moment in the next episode that I can't wait to talk about. But anyway, so Drake, thanks a lot for being here for today. If I know we'll be saying it at the end of every episode, but if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they, or wanted to see you preaching on a Sunday,
Sure.
Where would they go, or how would they reach out?
So I wear a few hats in the diocese these days. Excuse me, I'm very scratchy. So I am the vicar of St. Augustine's Church down in Kingston, Rhode Island. This is the mission church to the University of Rhode Island. So Sunday morning you can find me there. We have service at 9:30 every Sunday. And in addition to that role, I'm the Episcopal chaplain to the University of Rhode Island. So we also do programming for college students during the week. Wednesday evenings are great. If you're college or college adjacent sort of demographic, hit me up. We can talk. And I also am involved up at ECC, our Episcopal Camp and Conference Center, as the pastoral director. So you can see me hanging out up there, especially during the summer. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode of Tea Time Theology, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.
Thank you.
I'm going there to see my Father. I'm going there no more to roam. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over to sing his praise forevermore. I'm only going over Jordan. I'm only going over home.
Thank you for listening to Tea Time Theology, a ministry of St. John's Cathedral in Rhode Island. We would like to thank our producers, Ivy Swinsky and Taylor Wilkie. Special thanks to Mario Akande and David Hines for this season's music. Additionally, we would like to thank our sponsor, the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, and the Right Reverend Nicholas Knisley, as well as our guests today. Follow us at Tea Time Theology on all social medias.